My name is Quinn Hart. I'm a project scientist for JWST Science Communication in the Office of Public Outreach. So in the Office of Public Outreach here, I wanted to give you a little sense of that. So we're co-located here at the Science Operations Center for Hubble, Webb, and Roman. The Office of Public Outreach is a division at the Institute here, and we have a variety of expertise in OPO, as we call it, from media specialists, outreach scientists, educators. You're seeing a data visualization there to a source in JADES. We also work on exhibits like you see here at Dulles. There's a large display there. And we're embedded in this world-class research environment with a close connection to the science experts in the building, as well as you all, the science community, when we're meeting with you at, say, the science conferences like AAS. So we're creating public impact that's strategically planned. It starts with your scientific discoveries in your peer-reviewed publications. And from that, the objective is really to reach the public and enable learning opportunities by connecting them with you, the scientist, and other partners across the nation. And the strategy here is really timely delivery of all that content to the public, whether it's through our press releases or multimedia products, print products, or informal learning experiences. And that's what the public sees. And this is what we're going to walk you through today, is how do we take those so you can do that engagement and talk about the scientific discoveries with your audiences. So this is a multifaceted public engagement spectrum that OPO is involved in. At NASA, this is also happening on the communication landscape, which it focuses on the engagement with NASA and its missions. There's also science activation, which is a science mission directed program that focuses on using all those mission assets to engage people in learning science. So you can think about this spectrum of getting awareness and interest in the public, to inspiring and exciting them, to the knowledge and discovery. So moving people from one end of this, all the way to knowledge and discovery. There's pathways for them to do this through all different pieces. And OPO is involved in this as through news and outreach, and we share how the STSEI-led NASA missions advance our understanding of the universe as the SOC here. We also are involved in informal science learning to help people understand how science is done through that lens of all of astrophysics. So you'll see the resources that I'll share later on. It's a combination of both the mission-related communications as well as this informal science learning piece. So starting with news, it really is a place, foundation through which a lot of information does get to the public. So I just wanted to share the JWST news process. So OPO here leads the news operations for JWST. We work very closely with our NASA colleagues on the dissemination of the materials and the content here. They're released on the NASA website, and ESA typically co-issues with it, co-issues those releases as well. And we share them out through other venues like Eureka Alert, Newswise, Inbox Astronomy, and through social media channels. So news is that trusted piece by journalists and scientists. It's really highly impactful. And the news operations draws on all the different resources from within OPO here. So there's some snapshots of different news releases recently that you can see here. Now, what does it require for a news release? It requires a peer-reviewed journal publication. There's exceptions to that, usually findings at the American Astronomical Society conference, and also the other exception is if it's an image-only release. And in these press releases, we discuss the scientific findings and why they are significant. Now, the piece here is you don't have to wait until the paper is accepted to alert us. The earlier, the better is what we need to be able to consider it for a press release. And the news release won't post until the paper is accepted there. So, as soon as you submit the paper for publication, that's when we want to hear from you that you think something is newsworthy. So the process here is doing that submission, then it's considered by the news office. If it's selected, then the team will develop all the text and the supporting visuals, reviews that, goes through the NASA review process, and then it's finalized and posted. If the PI is European, then it'll be forwarded to ESA for consideration first. Now, how do you do this? So if you have something newsworthy, you come to us early, email us at scientistnews@stsci.edu. There's also a page on the stsci.edu website. Share this process with your colleagues, and you can visit the STSCI News page for this information on how to do that. There's a form, but you can also fill out an email with the details here. We do have a representative from our news team, Hannah Braun, who's here. So you're more than welcome to drop questions if you have any during this webinar, but you can also drop questions via that email that you see on the screen. Okay. So in terms of resources, this will be really high level because we'll get through it some more. The other outreach efforts to engage the public besides the news piece is looking at the highest resolution images. So there's this beautiful Herbert Harrow image, and if the public was extremely engaged with this, and if you look in this little region, people saw this question mark and they very much admired it, and you'll see it later in my talk here. We also engage the public with data visualizations like the penguin and egg here, as well as outreach videos such as this one you see on the right, how to study exoplanets. Other pieces here that we do in OPO, we attend events with our NASA colleagues, we go to science centers, create videos, have print products, tactile resources, slide decks, interactive resources, like what is Webb looking at right now. Now, NASA's Universal Learning Partnership, this is the Science Activation funded program. It is a program that has 4 different partner institutions: the Institute, IPAC, Center for Astrophysics, and JPL. So this program here is a direct connection to the discoveries and the scientific data and the experts spanning the full range of NASA astrophysics missions, including JWST. And we partner with organizations to incorporate that into their community program. And this map here is showing you different places around the nation where they've reused the resources from NASA's Universal Learning. This is also externally evaluated to help us get insights on what the audience needs are. Now, this is leveraging the co-location of all those science operation centers to create and disseminate all these astro-themed products. And so in this one here is a viewspace.org resource, and we have an interactive slider here that shows the view of this particular galaxy in all different kinds of wavelengths, and you can see the JWST data is incorporated into that. So I'll come back to this resource later. So this is just a little touch of the different kinds of assets that's available for you to incorporate into your talks, your touch points, exhibits, if you have a star party at night, and trying to figure out how to incorporate that. And this is where the rest of the talk is about that framework here. So communication. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the communication piece. It's a core skill for any profession, including for us as astronomers. It's as important as breathing. We do this all the time, whether it's at the dinner table with your family, whether you're in auditorium giving a science talk or a public talk, or if you're at a science conference. And so the question here is, what do you need to factor in to do the science communication? That's the challenge, is figuring out the what, the why, the how of it, and in a way that makes sense for you and the audience, right? So the who's in the audience? Why are you doing this? What are your goals? And what's the format in which you're going to do this? So effective communication here is when the audience walks away understanding what your message is. It's not about making sure that they know that you're the expert, right? It's about them. And that's that audience-centered focus here on science communication. I have a question for you. What are your goals for science communication? That's the why here. Here are some other ones that you're probably thinking about: creating all wonder for science, perhaps being a role model for future scientists, sharing the process of science, talking about how we can explore, push the boundaries, and do hard things in space. Really encouraging that curiosity that guides us to learn more about everything around us. Maybe it's about increasing science literacy across all different age groups, increasing awareness about science, astronomy, space telescopes, Webb. making sure people know that Webb is advancing our understanding of the universe. And perhaps it could be very specific that you study this topic and you're trying to understand this physical process, right? And so it could be at that level as well. And at the end of the day here, whatever your goal is here, you are sharing that science with different audiences. So the question is, we need to know your audience. So now you have the why. Now we have to talk about the who, is knowing your audience, the who, right? Now, if you know exactly who's in your audience, then when you start to plan your engagement with them, you might know that you might hit the mark, right? But everyone is not an audience. So you really want to pinpoint who's in that audience. Because if you don't know who that is, it's like shooting darts with the lights off. And so you might sort of hit the mark, but you might be way off base, right? And so knowing your audience is really key before you even start any of your science communication. So this will take us to our first activity. So this activity here is for us to get thinking about the audience. So this is an audience persona. Now this is a fictional person. It's not a real person. You don't have to give the person a name, but the goal here is to put yourself in this audience, the shoes of the audience, right? So you might ask questions as how old are they? What kind of job do they have? What kind of education level? What are they interested in? What motivates them? What's the science background? So you're thinking about all these different questions to really get a sense of, who's this person who's going to be in front of me? Also thinking about what kind of questions they might likely have as well. So it's about the planning piece. So for this activity here, you're asked by the organizers, so you've been invited, and they said, oh, we want you to talk about Webb and maybe your research. But they left it up to you on the best approach. So that's the only guidance that you have. All right, so we can each do, so room one, you'll see that your breakout room will have numbers at the top of the window when you go in. So group one, you'll be invited to an elementary grade 3 classroom visit for 20 minutes. Breakout room 2, you're going to be invited to a science cafe as a guest speaker. You have 15 minutes for your interaction there. And then group 3, it's astronomy day at the university or the institution. You're asked to set up demos and activities. It's a 3-hour event on a Saturday afternoon. So those are the events that you'll be talking about, the engagement pieces. Now, what you're going to be putting together is roughly something like this. So the audience persona, you can think about some of the details of that person, kind of like their background. And then you want to talk about what interests them, what motivates them, what kind of prior knowledge do they have, how do they get their information, and then what do you guys have in common, you and the person in the audience. I hope you guys had some engaging conversations over there about your fictional person here. I think it's a great exercise because sometimes we're in the moment thinking, okay, I have to go do this talk, and we work through and do this talk, or it's like, oh, I have this material over here, I'm just going to grab it, and then we know how things can be. But if you're more intentional with doing this and thinking about the people in your audience, what is it that they are hoping to get when you're spending time with them to engage them with the science about JWST and about your subject matter. So I have 2 questions here to pose to you coming out. And whoops, hold on. Okay. So the questions are, what were some surprising or unexpected details for your persona of the person in your event? I can offer up some things here. So something that's challenging I've seen when I've done this before is trying to decide who that persona is, especially if it's an event like the astronomy day, which it could span all different age groups, from the little 3-year-olds all the way to grandparents, right? So how do you focus that? So depending on the event, what are your goals on your event? Is it to all and inspire? So that might say, okay, well, if I'm all inspire, I'm not trying to teach them about the physics of black holes, then you might decide which activities and which ones would be appropriate for the different age groups. Or maybe you say, I'm only going to focus on this age group. So that I've noticed that's really hard. the other piece that I find really challenging is also how do they get information? Like, what is their background knowledge? It's really informative to say, okay, what do you think they might know coming in when they sit in front of you? And it's really hard to say, even 10 years ago, the way people got information was different than it is today. So I'm sure a lot of people are getting it through social media. And so saying, okay, well, what kind of information might they see on social media? And how can I use that to help frame what I'm about to share with them in that engagement? The wider your audience happens to be, you're more likely going to need to add a little bit more context into whatever your speaking points or the demonstration to be able to really capture that, so that people have some foundation, so that they can get to where you are wanting them to go. So there's lots of different engagement activities here that you're probably very familiar with or want to try, from classroom visits, college visits, community colleges, open houses, star parties, career days, guest speaking, libraries, summer camps, after school, and or even interviews with your local TV channel or even your social media efforts. So these are all different places where you can come in and inspire the audience, tell them about the process of science and how JWST is really changing how we're understanding the universe in different ways. And that could be with your topic. We'll get to your topic a little bit in messaging in the later part of this workshop. And so just always think back to, like, why do you want to do this science communication? What is your goal for the audience? Who's in your audience? And then there's going to be messaging as well. So now I'm going to segue into this middle part of the workshop, which is kind of just going through different pieces of resources to help you do that, and what not to do in some cases here. Now, the slides that you see here are part of a presentation slide deck that we did for Webb's launch, First Images, and First Year of Science. And so this will be linked as resources that you can look out till later. And they're meant to be a starting point, and then you can edit as you go along to suit your needs here. So thinking about the infrared eyes on the universe, how do we want to talk about JWST? So this part will be focused on JWST, and I'll go through some of it quickly because I know you guys, as my audience, you have a very good solid background on JWST, but thinking about the audience here. So one thing that I always tell people, that if people don't know that JWST is an infrared telescope, you've missed a very important message. So always convey that Webb's specialty is in infrared, and maybe you'll share that in contrast to Hubble Space Telescope, or thinking about Spitzer, or even thinking about the future Nancy Grace Roman telescope. Webb is a feat of engineering. We can talk all about the different things of why this is the most complex observatory in space, and look at all the engineering side of the views. And we like to talk about those gold mirrors are so iconic. So fun facts is really great for engaging. If you've been around kids, they probably know more facts about all different things, and such as this, the coating of gold here. They're very iconic, and they're interested about that gold. The fun fact here is that coating of gold is so thin that a human hair is 1,000 times thicker. So for some people in the audience, that might make sense, and you're like, okay, I can imagine that. But what could be even more interesting is a visual. So if you were to scrape all that gold off, how much gold would it be? It would be about the size of a marble. And so that visual is really important for those kinds of learners who can imagine, like, oh, okay, so that's that. Actually, it's not solid gold. It's it's not that much gold. And then you talk about why it's really important that we have gold covered mirrors here. We talk about the size of the mirrors, compare it to Hubble. Again, Hubble is great. It's a very iconic telescope still in operations, and people have that as a basis for our science interested audience. Now, in terms of size, like, okay, this might make sense. And I love to do this when I'm talking to folks. I'm like, okay, well, if I have the Hubble mirror and I'm sitting in your house, I can lean it up against your kitchen wall if I wanted to. It's about that big. They're like, oh, okay, that's pretty big. And then I said, well, JWST, I can't do that. It's too big. Well, how big? I have to lean it up against a 2-story building. And so that visual, again, allows them to understand the size of those mirrors. And then we know the observatory is roughly about a tennis court size. So having analogies and touch points to everyday things is really helpful in the communication, so that you're not using jargon here. for your different audiences, they might be really want to know, how do we talk to Webb? How long does it take for information to get from the Earth up to JWST? You might have an engineering group, and they really want to know, well, what's the upload and download rates, and what deep space network are we using? And so there's a graphic to talk about the upload speed, the download speed, the deep space network. There's 3 of them around the world, so that we have a beeline site to Webb here. And so you can use this to really expand on your audience depending on who's in your audience. Like, I wouldn't put this in an elementary school because they don't even know what KBPS means, right? In terms of field of regard here, for those who are like really interested to know, like, what is it? How can Webb see all of the sky? Because they have a sense that it's always pointed away from the sun, and it's a million miles away. They might want to know, I'm going to let this run here, the hot and the cold side. And then they want to know, how can it move in space? How can it tilt forwards and back, but still faced away from the sun? How can it rotate and then eventually see? So there are graphics here that allow you to share that information if the audience is very interested in this. Now, for Webb's ongoing discoveries here, there's all different areas, and we talk about them in themes: the early universe, galaxies over time, star life cycle, and other worlds. So one science topic could probably fit in all these. Now, if you're reaching a really young age, they might not even have this context. So for a younger age group, I highly encourage, one, that you don't give them a PowerPoint for 30 minutes because they will tune out. So keeping them engaged is really important. And so this is what I've done for the elementary age group. I just give them a basis. Let's play a guessing game, have them use fingers, 1, 2, 3, and just have them classify things. They love this because you're doing a two-way street communication with them. So I'll have to say, well, what do you see on the screen here? Have them guess. Go to this one, have them guess, and kind of work through that to get to the point where I can talk a little bit more about, why do we want to study star forming regions. If you have access to an infrared camera or a handheld, you could do the same thing. This is really nice, where you have 3 cups of water. The water has 3 different temperatures of water in there, and they're supposed to guess by looking at it like this. They can't, and you can say why, and then you're like, okay, well, if I put an infrared camera on it, can you guess now? And so it talks about the power of infrared light and why we can use it to study the universe in different places. We get this question all the time. Are Webb's images real? Yes, they are real. It's real data. But how do we create the images so that they have this color? Because they just learned that infrared light is not light that we can see. And so there is a lot of different resources to be able to share that, including a whole science explainer article about how the Webb images are made for the press release products that we have. And I'll share where those are later. The diffraction spikes. This is very, people are familiar with seeing twinkling stars. So the question is, what causes twinkling on Earth? Why do we go to space? What creates these spiky diffraction spikes on Hubble and JWST? This is a nice piece to leave them with, to go home and start to be just interested. Like, oh, wow, can I tell the difference between these kinds of images? You talk about how Webb is an international collaboration. Many people around the world help make Webb the success that it is, and you'll likely be able to find a scientist in any place you are and invite them to be able to share that with the audience. Now, the science communication resources, the STSCI Webb Mission Office put together a collation of resources here, and the URL is listed on the page as well. And you can see the different categories here. For example, if you're at, say, an astronomy club, they're very interested in the details, and they might want to know, what is the light path through Mary? Here's where you can find an animation from ESA on that light path. I want to find the highest resolution images because I happen to want to blow it up so it actually fits in my living room. You can go to nasa.gov/web and find those highest resolution images and download them. Perhaps you're really wanting to convey how the science community is extremely interested in wanting to use this telescope to talk about the performance and the other interesting data. This is also on the website. There's a media kit that was made for pre-launch, but there's some great visuals in there, some great quick facts, kind of, to get at the pieces of information that the audience can understand right off the bat without any background into astronomy itself. So they're just different touch points. And then the very last bucket here is general resources in terms of where can I find data visualizations? Where can I find the presentation slide decks? How can I get print products? There's the article for how Webb's full color images are made. If you're interested in getting print materials, you can, on the .edu website, there is a contact us form. You could just fill it out and say, I'm interested, I'm going to this event, I need about 100 print products. Can I get some so I can share it with my community? So put that request in, and we'll try to fulfill it as supplies supplies are limited. So if we can fulfill it, there's also other resources. Were you curious to know what is Webb observing right now? So we have an interactive resource called Space Telescope Live. This is on the NASA website as well as spacetelescopelive.org. It is able to bring in the observing schedule and tell you exactly what is being observed at a given moment for a certain duration of time. You can actually observe, open up the observing details, find out the observing proposal, which scientist is doing this. So this was from last night. The background image is a 2-mass image, but I always like to say, oh, what is it observing right now? So, oh, it's observing Saturn. This is awesome, right? And so that's really, get them engaged. Like, wow, there's lots of different topics that are being observed with the observatory. Under NASA's Universe of Learning here, the website is universe-of-learning.org. The resources on this program are filtered by type. So for example, if you're interested in looking for tactile materials or sonifications across different areas of astrophysics, and some of those also have web content in them as well, you can use this. We also have program guides. So if you happen to be going to a library and you're like, I need to figure out how to do an art-inspired activity for 60 minutes on exoplanets, that exists. The point here is that you don't need to recreate the wheel. You do not need to start from scratch. We have resources not only from the mission itself, but also through science activation and NASA SMD for you to access. And these are all on that resource page that you can find on stsci.edu. If you are looking to just improve and strengthen your science communication, there's also a science SME, subject matter expert toolkit under NASA's Universal Learning to kind of work with other organizations when you're trying to get invited. Like, what do I need to know to be able to be successful in what they're asking me to do? So there's a toolkit there as well. Viewspace.org here is another resource. This has some great interactive content that anybody can access through the URL viewspace.org. This is, we call these sliders. And the beauty of this particular slider is just showing you the difference between an optical view and an infrared view. On viewspace.org, you can also put labels on it so that it can point out the different details. And I love to show this in an audience so that they can see the changes. So this is a quick video that I made, but you can also offer it up as here's different ways you can explore. I love to send them home with something, like go and do this on your own time because we've ran out of time, but there's so much to explore. There's also other resources through NASA-funded programs like NISENet, and they have lots of different hands-on activities that might fit your needs, might be a good foundation for the astronomy topic so that then you can delve into the JWST piece. For example, there's this nice activity called Exploring Light, Filtered Light. So if you're looking at all different age groups, perhaps maybe at an astronomy day activity, you might have this hands-on piece to talk about filters in general, and then you could segue to why do we have filters on telescopes, and then show them an animation that has a light path going through with the different filters and why we have to do that depending on who's in front of you. So this is a nice way to think about that progression if you're looking at an audience that's quite large in age. I also like to do hands-on things. So this is an activity that I did during COVID, and so it was virtual, but everyone had Play-Doh, and so we started to make clay roles. And the point here was to create a galaxy just so they can get a sense of the different kinds of galaxies out there. So taking those clay rolls and making a spiral galaxy, what do you notice about that? And so just have them observe these images. What about a barred spiral? And so this is somebody saying, hey, I see that there's different colors. There's some pink areas, there's some blue areas, there's some yellow areas. What does that mean? It's an invitation to have that conversation. And then here we have an elliptical galaxy. So there are different ways to be really creative in your own way to be able to bring the audience along with whatever you're trying to convey to them. So just, this is a curated set of resources for what we've heard from the science community when they're looking for something. We're just providing an entry point to where you can find those so that you can create the materials that you need to do the engagement that you're looking to accomplish. This is an activity you can do on your own. In the past, I've done this activity myself just to plan a talk around science communication. I did this for a younger career audience, some undergrads, and it was really I was able to really pinpoint, what is it that I want to share in that talk? Because you can share a lot, but you don't want to overwhelm the audience with that information. So here we're going to do an activity called Half-Life Your Message. So the goal here is you're going to have to think fast on your feet. You pick a topic. Preferably if you want to talk about your own science topic, that's fine, but it really can be any topic. So here are the rules. You're going to talk through whatever topic you have just identified, but you have to say everything you want to say in 60 seconds. And then the clock resets. Now you have to redo it, except you have to tell your message in 30 seconds. It'll reset. You have to tell the message again, but now you have 15 seconds. And then finally you have 8 seconds. So we do have I have a resource here that has a timer set to those 60, 30, 15, and 18 seconds. So there's a QR code here. You can bring it up on your phone. On the Google Doc, I've also linked this YouTube to there so that you can find it. Countdown looks like this video here, and it just will, go through like that. All right. That made this talk memorable was people walked into the talk thinking they had gone to the wrong talk, because I really did have a CAT scan up on the screen. They're like, oh wait, I thought it was in an astronomy talk. I'm like, no, you're in the right talk. They're very confused. And so I kind of hooked them already. Unintentionally, I hook them. It's like, what does this have to do with an astronomy talk? So that's not a real picture of my brain, nor is that a real picture of my talk, but those are real figures from my dissertation, which I probably put in my talk. So the piece here is that there is a common piece. People are familiar with the image on the left, but they're not familiar with the image on the right. And the thing that bridges that is the mathematics. So to back out a computerized tomography scan, you have to go around in 360 degrees around the brain, and then you mathematically can put that into a sliced image. You can do that with binary stars, except you don't go around the binary star spins for you, and then you get that information. So it was a really nice touch point. Like in retrospect, I was like, oh, that was pretty good, even though I didn't know I had to do that. So I was able to get to one of the core messages from the start to hook them and then bring them along for the ride there on how it plays into the topic that I'm talking about for, in this case, algal binaries. Now, we didn't really touch base on doing media relations, public relations, and interviews. So my recommendation for you all, and this is based on my own personal experience, this big eclipse in 2017 across the United States. I was in Denver, Colorado. It wasn't quite totality, but super close, in like 92 or 93%. And everybody was interested in this. So the media were everywhere. And so I had never really been on the local TV channel. I didn't know how to start. So I reached out to our marketing group, our PR group, and they prepped me. They went with me to the interview. They said, this is how you should do things. The TV staff were really, really helpful too. They're like, this is how you use the earpiece and this is what you're going to hear. So ask for all that help to make sure that you're successful in what you're doing and engaging the public to share whatever topic that you're sharing about. The same thing happened when I did some interviews for our first images for JWST at NASA Goddard here. The staff there were amazing. They're like, okay, this is what to expect, and this is kind of the amount of time, and here are the talking points. Keep it under a minute if you can, and this is why. Be clear, speak to the screen. So all of those details, there are people out there to help you. And you'll get help from friends and family too. Like my sister was in marketing, and she was able to connect me with somebody who gave me pointers for this particular event here. All right, so we're almost done here. So just wrapping up, we get all kinds of questions when you're out talking to the public, whether it's at a school, a science cafe. What are the tips for fielding all kinds of questions? Keep it short as best you can, under a minute. So that's doing that half-life a message activity. A minute was pretty long, right? So think about that as like, okay, that's my basis to be able to answer a question. Talk to what you know and you understand. Okay, if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know the answer. You can say, wow, that's a great question. I don't really have enough background on that, but I know a colleague who does, and maybe we can touch base afterwards and I can connect you. Now, maybe there's a question that's just out of left field. It's not even related to what you just talked about. And for all of us who do not study black holes, you most likely will get black hole questions all the time. It's quite interesting to a large swath of the population. So there's different ways to approach this. Maybe it's how are black holes related to what you work on. So for example, algal binaries, they're two stars in orbit around each other. How do we find black holes? Well, we can find them and weigh them, get their mass, right, by looking at them in binary star systems as well. So that's how I would segue between black holes in my talk. And you could steer it back to your area if you know what is in that field. So there's different ways to kind of address the question, but also move on so that you can answer other questions. Another really important piece is to familiar yourself with the trending astronomy topics in the news, because that will be top of mind for the public, and they most likely, oh, I have access to an astronomer. I'm going to ask this astronomer this question. I just saw this thing in the news and I'm really curious, and maybe they'll tell me what's happening. So for example, the most recent lunar eclipse, I got calls from my family, tell me more about the lunar eclipse. So knowing what's happening, even if it's not in your field, is really helpful for all this engagement that you do in the public. So in conclusion here, the best practices in science communication, what are those? So if I could summarize that, you want to know your audience. You want to know yourself, what your goals are, and the goals for the audience. You want to develop that message before you start anything. Make it relevant to them. Why should they care about the topic so that you can bring them along for that ride? So you're going to have all these different pieces, like Lego pieces here. What's the story you're going to tell, right? So it's about bringing them along for that journey, that story that you're about to unfold. Now that story can be a quick story, 5 minutes, because that's what you have their time if they're coming by a activity station. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's a whole hour, but think about that story. Identify what you need to be able to tell that story. What's the content? What are the resources? How do you, if it's a younger age, how are you going to engage them with something they can do? Okay, so you're going to be able to get those pieces to eventually think about, okay, what's the language I want to use? Don't use jargon. Use simple information. Use common touch points to be able to have analogies to help them see the message that you're trying to convey. And then once you have all those Lego pieces, you can put it together and implement your plan. That's put that plan together and make something fantastic like the structure here. And then you can pass along your passion and enthusiasm in that engagement so you can connect with the audience and have lots of fun. And so those best practices here are things that you can do and try a little bit at a time, integrate it into what feels good and natural to you to get to a point where you can get to any of those audiences because you have all the tools in front of you. So I wanted to take a second here to thank all of you for for your efforts in science communication, because we know that you, the science community, are going out there and telling the world about how JWST is changing how we understand different objects. We're seeing the furthest galaxies that we weren't able to before the launch of JWST. We're peering into the depths of different places that are cold, where stars are born. We're looking at the atmospheres of planets in a way we could never see before, and we have lots of surprises. And so I want to thank you for all your efforts to do that, to communicate the power of space telescopes and Webb, and specifically to that audience. So with that, thank you very much for participating in this JWebbinar, and happy to field questions. Thank you.